This script was brought to you by the TLDR socials. Get more from TLDR by following us on Instagram and Twitter, where we post explainers that never make it to YouTube. The link's below. You might have heard that California is having a special election at the moment, which could potentially recall their governor, Gavin Newsom. And yes, this is a special election. The US election cycle isn't moving even faster than normal, so let's take a look at Newsom, why people want to take him down, and if they're likely to be successful. So, in July 2020, a group of Republicans, led by former Yolo County Sheriff Sergeant Orrin Heatley, started a campaign to recall Gavin Newsom. California is one of only 19 states across the US that allows for gubernatorial recalls, and they're pretty popular, largely because launching a recall in California is easier than in basically any other state. There have been 56 recall efforts since the practice was introduced in 1911, with every governor since 1960 facing at least one, but only 2 have actually got to ballot. This one, and the recall effort against Greg Davis in 2003, which ended with the election of Arnold Schwarzenegger. According to the 1911 law, to successfully qualify for ballot, it needs to garner at least as many legitimate signatures as 12% of voters in the last election for the office, and must include voters in at least 5 counties. Given that, in 2018, when Newsom faced off against Republican Joe Cox, there were about 12.5 million votes, this means that the recall effort needs to garner about 1.5 million signatures to qualify for ballot. Originally, the recall effort was about Newsom's decision to suspend the death penalty, and it looked like it wasn't going anywhere. This was in part because Newsom's approval ratings shot up at the start of the pandemic, with 83% of Californians approving of his handling of the COVID crisis in April, making him the most popular governor in the US at the time. The recall effort struggled to pick up basically any votes in November when Newsom was caught dining without a mask at a Michelin-star French restaurant in Napa with 22 people. Technically, when Newsom attended the dinner on November the 6th, it was allowed under state rules for Napa, but it still didn't look good when Newsom introduced tougher restrictions just 10 days later. The recall effort successfully applied for a 120-day extension on the grounds that COVID had slowed the effort, which gave them until March to garner the 1.5 million signatures. While the campaign had originally focused on Newsom's decision to suspend the death penalty in California, it quickly spiralled into a more general anti-Newsom protest. The official recall effort lists 73 different reasons you should recall Newsom, with everything ranging from his French restaurant hypocrisy to rent controls. A lot of the reasons in the list are well-worn Republican talking points, stuff like mask mandates, high taxes, mail-in voting. While Newsom has made some specific mistakes, the French restaurant debacle and a confusing vaccine distribution system, the recall effort has also been partly driven by a more general pandemic-related frustration amongst Californians. Anyway, as the pandemic wore on, the recall effort garnered more votes, and on the 1st of July 2021, the Secretary of State certified that recall supporters had submitted 1.7 million valid signatures, qualifying for ballot. Californians started mail-in voting on August the 16th, and had until September the 7th to request a mail-in ballot. Voting closes on September the 14th, which is when Newsom will find out if he keeps his job. Now, in California, a recall ballot has 2 questions on it. The first is whether or not Newsom should be recalled. The second asks who you'd like to replace him, if he is indeed recalled. Importantly, you can't put Newsom's name here. If 50% of voters say they don't want Newsom to be recalled in the first question, then that's that, Newsom stays. If on the other hand, more than 50% say they do in fact want him to be recalled, he's replaced by whoever wins the most vote in the second question. Importantly, Newsom's successor won't need a majority, just a plurality. This is a bit of a weird one because it essentially means you've got 2 elections on one ballot. First, you've got the recall election, then second, you've got the election for Newsom's successor. Newsom and his fellow California Democrats have chosen a relatively high-risk strategy for this election as well, telling Democrats to leave the second question blank, just vote straight against Newsom's recall and that's that. Newsom and California Democrats have also refused to endorse any other Democratic candidate. Presumably, this is to maximise Newsom's chances of surviving the recall by discouraging Democrats from voting out Newsom in the hope that they can replace him with a different Democrat. But this is obviously pretty risky, because if Newsom loses, Democrats won't have a frontrunner in the runoff race. This means the Democrat vote will split between a whole load of different candidates, making it a lot easier for a Republican to win. This is exactly what seems to be happening. Despite the fact that California is a majority Democrat state, Republican Larry Elder is well ahead of the closest Democrat, YouTuber Kevin Paffrath. Larry Elder is a conservative radio talk show host who supported Trump in 2020. Elder describes himself as a small L libertarian who would scrap the minimum wage, most public welfare, and state-funded health insurance. Elder also plans on legalising recreational drugs. Paffrath is a 29-year-old real estate investor and YouTuber with 1.7 million subscribers. He's running as a Democrat, but he's probably best described as a centrist. Sometimes he sounds like a Republican. He wants to make all COVID restrictions optional, scrap income tax on anyone earning less than $250,000 a year, and use the National Guard to get the homeless off the streets. But he also wants a version of universal basic income, more solar and wind farms, and higher pay for teachers. Elder and Paffrath have emerged as frontrunners in a field of 46 candidates, which includes 9 Democrats and 26 Republicans, including former Olympian Caitlyn Jenner. Essentially, if Newsom doesn't get 50% of the vote, Elder looks most likely to win, with just 24% support. So, what are the chances of Newsom actually losing? Well, according to the polls, the race was pretty tight back in August, but Newsom has since opened up a steady 10-point lead. This is probably in part because Newsom has raised far more money than the recall effort recently. In the last 30 days, the recall opponents have raised nearly $19 million, compared to the $5 million that its supporters have managed. In total, Newsom's supporters have raised nearly $70 million, whereas his opponents have raised just $12 million. It's also worth noting that Newsom's approval ratings are way ahead of Gray Davis's, the only Californian governor to be successfully recalled. Davis was recalled back in 2003, when he was succeeded by Republican Arnold Schwarzenegger. When Davis lost his recall with 45% of the vote, his approval rating was down in the 20s. Newsom, on the other hand, is currently enjoying an approval rating above 50%. California has also become bluer since 2003. Today, 47% of Californians are registered as Democrats, compared to 44% in 2003, and just 24% are registered as Republicans, compared to 35% in 2003. Newsom also won a landslide in 2018, with 62% of the vote and a record turnout of 63%, up from just 31% in 2014. Davis, on the other hand, won just 47% of the vote on 36% turnout. Davis was also facing off against a global megastar in Arnold Schwarzenegger, and no offence to Larry Elder, but he's no megastar. Anyway, the point is that Newsom is doing a lot better than Davis, who still nearly survived his recall. So Newsom should be fine. Newsom should also be buoyed by the fact that the majority of ballots returned so far have been Democrat. Of the 6 million or so ballots returned so far, 3 million have been Democrat, whereas just 1.4 million have been Republican. So that's the long and short of it. Newsom should win, but if he doesn't, then his Newsom or nothing strategy means that Larry Elder, a libertarian Republican with his minority support, could sneak his way into California's governorship. As a final thing, some commenters have argued that Newsom's case proves that California's recall law is too relaxed and makes recall too easy. Obviously, no one can know the future, but this recall effort looks relatively futile. Frankly, Newsom has pretty good approval ratings and Larry Elder would almost definitely be less popular. But we're not saying we think Newsom is better than Elder, it's just probably true that Elder is less popular among Californians than Newsom. This means, having spent almost $250 million on organising the recall, either Californians stick with Newsom or they get someone they actually like less. But what do you think though? Should Newsom be recalled? And more pressingly, will he be recalled? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram for more TLDR content. You can follow just the TLDR US socials, or just go wild and follow whichever TLDR accounts interest you. Anyway, following and sharing our posts not only gets you more from us, but it really helps us out a lot, so thanks. And of course, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified whenever we post a video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that is down in the description below.